Hey, good morning guys. So I just got 3 brand new African violets a few weeks ago and I'm finally getting to repot them up this morning. So I thought I would take this opportunity to share with you what I have learned through the years on how to have more success with African violets when it comes to repotting. So the first thing I want to talk about is knowing when to repot them. So generally your African violets need to be repotted about once a year. It's always a good idea to go in at least, like at a minimum, go in once a year, look at your house plants, really like inspect them. Do the leaves look healthy? Have they been blooming? How long has it been since they've bloomed? Can you pull your plant a little bit out of the pot and check the root system? Do the roots look healthy? Is it root bound? African violets do tend to like to be a little bit root bound, but there is a fine line between too much and a good thing. So you want to make sure that you kind of keep them on a good schedule of repotting so they stay nice and healthy. The other reason why you might want to repot is because you just bought them like I did and you want to get them out of this plastic nursery can. So you're not necessarily potting them up, meaning you're not potting them up into a bigger size pot, you're just potting them just to get them out of their plastic can. So that's what I'm doing today. When you're getting ready to repot your African violet, there are a couple considerations when it comes to the type of container you're using that you'll want to know. First of all, African violets roots, they grow more out than they do down. So you want to choose pots that are more wide and shallow, kind of like this one right here. Now this one is way too big for this size of violet, but I brought it down just to show you kind of the shape of pot you should be looking for. I've got little sempervivum babies growing in this one right now. But this is a great shape of pot because the African violets will fill that up. What happens when you get too deep of a pot is that the violet roots will never make it to the bottom, and so you've got all this unused soil down there, meaning that water, when you water them, the water is going to kind of stay down there and keep the soil wet because the plant's not utilizing it, which can lead to root rot. So you just want to keep that in mind and choose more shallow containers. Now there are different types of container materials you can choose too. The first is terracotta, which is my favorite. I am a huge fan of terracotta. I think they just are really classic. Terracotta is a really good choice for African violets because violets like to have a lot of aeration around their root system, and the porosity of this type of material allows air in and out. And the other thing that's really good is that the water will soak through the sides of the container, and when it evaporates, it'll make the air around the plant more humid, which is really good for the plant. So I really like this option. It's my favorite. The other option is a glazed ceramic, and I like glazed ceramic for the most part, and I'm going to be planting one of these in this pot today. But I'm going to have to keep in mind that the watering will be different in this pot because it's not evaporating water, the water's not soaking out, so I won't have to water it quite as often as I would in a complete terracotta pot. The other thing is the traditional African violet pot. You may have seen something like this in the store before. So how this works is you plant the violet in this top portion right here, and then this is just terracotta right here. So, and then you've got a completely glazed bottom. So you can put water in this reservoir and then slide your plant back down in here, let it sit for an hour. The root system soaks up water from that reservoir, and then after that hour's up, you just pour any excess water out. So it does make watering pretty handy, but to be honest, I haven't found an African violet pot that I love, so I tend to stick with terracotta. Now the other choice is plastic. You can keep them in plastic, it's totally fine. I just don't really like the look of it, so it's not my preference, but I get it. I get why people like plastic. It's really lightweight, it doesn't break, it lasts forever. So you can do that, but like this one, you'll have to monitor the water because water's not leaving the sides of that pot. There's not as much aeration, so it won't dry out as quickly. Before you plant your African violet, it's always a good idea, even with brand new containers, to disinfect them. So soak them in a bleach solution that's 10%, so 1 part bleach, 9 parts water. Just give them a quick soak and then rinse them off with plain water. That way you kill anything that could be on that pot. Like these 2 right here, actually these 3. All 3 of these pots I've used before with other plants. So I made sure to scrub them out and soak them with a bleach solution so I know they're completely clean and I don't have to worry about introducing anything onto my new plants. This one I just brought home to show you the example, so this one is going back to the garden center tomorrow. All right, so now I'm gonna pot them up and I'm gonna start with this one. You guys, I think that this is one of the prettier violets ever. I tend to like the traditional purple, dark purple African violets. This is a double though. When I saw it, I just fell in love. I had to have it. When I bought all 3 of these, this one was just starting to bloom and these ones were already in full bloom. So unfortunately, they don't have any blooms left. One of them is white. I don't know which one. And I didn't label them. You should always label the color so that you know. But one of them's white and one of them's pink with a white edge. So they're all different. They're all really pretty. So I had decided earlier that I wanted to put this purple one in this terracotta pot. And a quick word about the soil, you want to make sure, just like when you're potting up all your other houseplants, especially like your cactus and succulents, that you're using proper soil for them. Same goes for African violets. You want to make sure that you're using the proper blend of soil, because regular potting mixes or regular straight up houseplant potting mix is usually too heavy for African violets because their root system is pretty fragile and it's too heavy, it can damage them. It also holds a little bit too much water for this type of plant. They don't like to be sitting in water. They like to dry out pretty quick after you water them. And also it's usually not the right pH. So you want to make sure that you're just giving them the right soil. So I'm just going to use a straight up, this is Espoma organic African violet soil, and they will really be happy. So I'm going to add a little bit to the bottom of the pot first. I don't have to add much though, because this is not much taller, which is kind of nice. I won't have to use a whole bunch of soil. So I'm gonna do that first. And then when you take your African violet out of your pot, you wanna be really gentle. So I just cut my hands around one side of the plant and gently squeeze the pot off. And I'm liking the look of this. I can see some roots in there, they look good. They're looking really nice and healthy, nice and white. But they're not root bound, so that's good. I know that I will get quite a long time out of this container because it's got quite a ways to grow. So I'm just gonna set it down in here. I wanna make sure there's a little bit of a lip, just so soil doesn't fall out. And then I'm gonna gently just use my hand and put some soil around the plant. You wanna be super careful because these leaves are really rigid. They do not like to flex very much, so you want to just be real gentle when you lift up the leaves. I make more of a mess when I'm planting violets than with anything else because I want to be so careful. They need their space. Okay, so this one's all done. I've got soil packed around the root ball really nicely, but I was real gentle when I was packing it in. I don't want to break any of the roots. So now I'm going to plant this one. I think I'm going to be able to show you a little bit of a different method of planting with this one because the container is a little bit wider. So what I'm doing is I'm going to put a little soil at the bottom, just enough to compensate for the height of the root ball that I have here. So I know I'm going to need to be putting about an inch or so of soil at the bottom. Get that in there. I think that's about good. So then next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the plant out gently. Also, if you're potting up an African violet from a different pot, not plastic, that are easy to get off, maybe you've got yours in a terracotta pot and it's really hard to get out. One thing you can do is you can ease a butter knife if you can. You can gently lift the leaves up a bit and ease a butter knife around the edge to kind of help loosen the sides. You don't really want to dig around in there. You don't want to stick, I've seen people stick stuff up the drain hole on the bottom, but that can really hurt the root system. So you just want to go slow and just work on it for a little while, and don't do it too quickly because you don't want to ruin the roots. Okay, so I've got about an inch of soil there. Now what you can do is you take this plastic pot and you put it in here, and then I can see how much soil I'm going to need around there. And this is a little bit of a messy process, but that's okay. It makes it easier. I'm going to put soil in now around this pot, and I'm going to create a hole big enough, exactly big enough for this root ball, so I don't have to be getting in there and adding more soil later. Okay, so I've got soil packed in around the container, and I'm just going to pull it out gently. Hopefully it comes out clean. Voila, I've got a perfect size hole. I don't think I'm going to tip this very much because I don't want to wreck it. But it's a perfect size hole for this African violet, so all I have to do is boom. Done. I love that method. I think they call it mold potting. So they mold soil around the pot, and then you can just pop your plant in and you're all done. It's especially helpful if you have pots that are shaped like this. You know those urn types that kind of go like this, to where you've got this big bubble kind of in the center and you've got a lot of soil to pack in there. It's super nice to have it all done and packed in the sides before you put your plants in. This one I'm not going to need to add very much soil to at all, if any. This is a smaller pot. Yep, I actually might need to knock a little bit off, which that's okay in this situation because these plants have a lot of room to grow. So generally you can look at an African violet and judge based on the diameter of its leaves what size of container it needs to be in. It is very general, but let's say you've got a 12-inch diameter violet. That means that you should have it in about a 4-inch pot. So you know that like this one is not measuring 12 inches, so it doesn't need to be in quite a 4-inch pot. It can be a little bit more root bound, and that actually might help it to bloom a little bit better. So I'm just removing a tiny bit of soil around the root ball. I can see the healthy little roots. It's perfect. And now I'm going to introduce a little bit of soil back in, just so it's nice and snug in its pot. The repotting is done, so now we need to water them in. And the best way to do that is to submerge them, the base of the pot, in water for about an hour. So if you've got a deep enough saucer, I've got a couple saucers here. If you've got a deep enough saucer, you can put water in there. See how this pot fills this saucer up pretty good? I'm not going to be able to get much water in there. I'll be able to get quite a bit more in this saucer. You want to make sure there's enough water that can soak up in there. So for both of these, it's a little bit of a stretch. So what I'm going to do is get a pan of water, and I will just set these down in to where the water comes up to about here. I'll leave them in that pan for about an hour, and then I'll take them out, put them in their saucers, and they're good to go. This one here, I will do the same thing. This one has a saucer attached to it, but you can see that it's barely got any lip there. There's nowhere for the water to set. And that's where the actual African violet pots come in handy, because you don't really have to move them from their spot. You can just lift the top out, put water in. The only time you need to move them is if there's excess in there and you need to pour it out. But since I don't like to do it that way, I'm just going to put these in a pan of water. You can even put them in the bottom of your sink and put water in there. The reason why we do that is African violets do not like to have any water touching their leaves. They can burn. In fact, I got a little drip on this one, and I can show you exactly what happens when you get water on the leaves. It happens occasionally. And you know, I have watered them in the past from the soil, and I'm real careful. They do okay. They prefer to be watered from underneath. Most houseplants do. But that's not always practical. So, I mean, you can get away with overhead watering as long as you don't actually overhead. You're just directing the water right at the soil and not touching the leaves. You don't want water setting on the leaves. So I'm going to water them in, and then you can pretty much consider yourself done. I mean, they're repotted, they're looking good, but there is one other thing that you can do to really increase your success rate. It's something that I've found pretty incredible. It's called tenting. So I used to read about it in books and manuals, African violet guides, things like that, and I'd never had done it until I really recently saw it being done. So my mom replanted a bunch of African violets down at the garden center, and then she put one of them under a glass jar. The one under the glass jar it just flourished. Like, it just started blooming its head off, tons of new leaves. So what happens when you tent? You create a mini greenhouse around your African violet, really just even for the first week or two after you've repotted, and it helps increase the humidity around the plant, which reduces transplant shock, and it helps the violet start rooting in and growing. So if you can do that, that is the best thing for it. You can use a large clear plastic bag, just something really light, something that won't interfere with the leaves or the blooms. Just lightly tent it and then tie it off with a twist tie or something. I'm going to be using something different. Let me grab these. So here's one and two. Okay, so I prefer to do things a little bit more decoratively. I would rather not have my beautiful African violet that's blooming right now in a plastic bag. So I'm going to be displaying them in, one is going to go in this bell jar, and then two of them are going to go in this terrarium. And this one is pretty much airtight. If a lot of condensation forms in here, I probably will prop it up. I usually just fold a napkin up and just kind of prop it under one side just to let a tiny bit of air escape. This one is almost airtight. It does allow a little bit of air to escape here, so this will be probably pretty perfect. The whole point is that you don't have to create a completely closed environment. The whole point is just to increase the humidity around your plant. So I'm going to start with this bell jar. What I'm going to do is put this one right in the center. And then I had a little bit of eucalyptus from another arrangement, and it's almost dried. They dry so beautifully, so I thought I would ease it into the side of the roots. I don't hit the roots with it, but I thought to create a little bit of height, a little bit of drama, I'm adding that in. I'm going to need to cut it a little bit though. Because really, when we buy new houseplants, we want to be able to display them in our home like right away, and having them in a plastic bag kind of, I don't know, negates that purpose. So this is a kind of a good alternative. So there's that one, and I could even go in and put a few little pine cones around the base to kind of amp it up a little bit more. And then for this one, so I'm going to open it up, and these ones are just going inside. Again, you want to make sure wherever you put them that you're not impeding their leaves, because they do need their space to grow. So I wanted to fit all three of them here. I tried it earlier. I tried putting one up on a pedestal so that they could be at different levels, and it just wasn't working. So don't fight it. Just find a spot where they'll fit and they'll be nice and happy. So that's perfect. So now I am done. And So I can leave these in these enclosed structures for a week or two, and then I can bring them out to the full air. But since they aren't completely airtight, I can leave them in here and they'll be totally happy. And I did bring this one, you've probably seen this the whole time. I brought this one up here because it's just growing like a weed. This is one of my African violet containers. It's got 5 in there. And this one is just, like, the flowers are huge, and look at these leaves. They are like just amazing. This one isn't actually in a south-facing exposure, kind of. It gets a little bit of shade from the curtain, so it's not getting full sun. They don't like full sun. So it's loving its spot, but I'll twirl it around so you can see. There's 3 back here, and then there's the 2 huge ones right up front. Anyway, I thought you might enjoy seeing that. And that's actually a good example of a pot too. So see, it's like pretty wide, but it's shallow. This one goes on top of a little cherub that's holding it up. It's a really pretty arrangement. So that's it, you guys. So I know I focused a lot on just the repotting aspect of African violets and not so much on the basics like watering, light requirements, heat, temp, all those kind of things. So we are going to be putting together a video more about African violet basics. So if you're interested in watching that, we will put a link to it in the comment or description down below. If you like the video, give us a thumbs up, make sure you're subscribed, and we will see you in the next video. Bye.